is John Hammond, and welcome to Smart from the Start. You know, in this series we've been talking about many aspects of education, from school life to the explosion of knowledge. But for this episode we have a really interesting topic, and that is of Indigenous education here in Australia. When I use the word Indigenous, I can also use the word Aboriginal. And we have a very talented and interesting panel. And two of them are Aboriginal folk and two of them are church administrators, but I'd like you to meet them. We'll turn here to Pastor Ken. Would you just like to briefly describe your role as an administrator in the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Hello, John. Yes, I'm General Secretary for the Australian Union Conference. That is our national church office.
Yeah. And you have a big interest in Indigenous work?
Significant interest.
Yeah.
My work previously has taken me to many Indigenous ministry areas, so I have an interest in my current work, but I've had a previous interest as well.
And we have Pastor Leo. It's good to have you here with us today, Leo. And just tell us, where are you from and where are you working at present?
Yeah, my name's Leo, and I'm working for a pastor at the North New South Wales Conference in Armidale.
And Leo and I actually are brothers in a way, because we both were born and bred in Kempsey. We're from the same town, which has quite a significant Aboriginal community, and you will hear Leo's story in a little while. It is remarkable. And welcome to the panel, Steve.
Thank you, John.
What do you do within the church organisation?
My title is ATSIM Director, John.
ATSIM?
Yes,
Can
ATSIM.
you spell that for us?
Yes, ATSIM. John, it's the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Ministries Department of the Church.
Now we have many people from overseas watching, and they might think, well, it's Aboriginal, but what's this other place, the Torres Straits? Can you tell us just the encompassment of where you work?
I suppose it's the department that looks after Indigenous ministry across Australia, and the Torres Strait Islands is that group of islands to the north of the Cape York, and right around Australia.
You must spend a lot of time away from the office.
I do, a lot of time away from home, and there are issues we're working through with the wife and I.
And Joan, it is so nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
And where is home for you?
Home is at Coondoola, Western Australia.
Whereabouts is that? Can you say it again? It's a lovely name.
Coondoola.
All right. And whereabouts is that in Western Australia?
Down the bottom, near to the north of Perth.
All right. Mm. And Perth, of course, is the capital of Western Australia. And what are you doing at present?
At the moment, I'm a student at the Mamarafa Bible School. Okay. In Carragullen.
And that is, I believe, on the outskirts of Perth?
Yes.
On a beautiful block of ground?
Yes.
You know, you'll soon get the impression that Australia is a very, very large country. I've had the privilege of driving right across the country. If you go on the Seal Highway across the Nullarbor Plain, which means no trees, it'll take you about 4 days. But the way I did it, it took me 21 days of constant driving, camping out in the desert at night. And as I went through the different deserts and landscapes, I realized that we have an incredibly diverse landscape. I travelled through quite a few Aboriginal communities. And you know, the Aborigines have been in this country for thousands and thousands of years. And I don't know how you feel about it, Joan and Leo, but around about 1788, the white man arrived in Australia with Captain Phillip and a few boats, and they like to say that they colonised the country, and whether you find that offensive or not, but I know that many Aboriginal people feel that it was an invasion. Because with it, the white man brought alcohol and a lot of the bad habits of the advanced Western civilization, and they brought health issues that spread to the Indigenous people. And sadly to say, the plight of the Aboriginal people today is quite a desperate one. We have two types of issues. We have the Aborigines who live in the urban centres, the suburbs of Redfern and Sydney, and they have a whole set of problems. And we have the Indigenous folk who live in the remote country areas, and they have problems too. But through it, we have a people of spirit and pride and dignity and great talent. And it's just wonderful to see the number of our Indigenous folk who are taking training, becoming ministers, becoming lay workers, becoming teachers. And Leo, I've known you for a few years now. I first met you at our Mamarafa College, and we're going to be talking about that. And it has been wonderful to see you graduate. And Joan, I've seen you over there at Mamarafa, and your work here is very, very important. Now, I'm going to take a break here, and just don't go away, because we're going to start talking to these people and getting their life story. There is sadness, but in their story there is great joy. Don't go away. Welcome back to Smart from the Start. We have been talking in this episode about the Aboriginal people in Australia. They're also known as the Indigenous people, and we are really privileged to have two of our Aboriginal people here with us. And I want to talk to you for a little while, Joan, and you have a fascinating life story. Where were you born?
I was born in Subiaco in Western Australia.
All right, that's really part of Perth.
Yes.
And as you grew up, did you live in a normal, happy home, or what happened?
At first I did. I lived with my parents and my grandparents up until the age of 5 or 6, round about 6. Yeah. Then I was placed in an orphanage.
You were placed in an orphanage, and how long were you there?
I was there for about 9 years.
Right through those formative years?
Yes.
Yeah. And was there a background? I mean, we talk about the stolen generation. Is that part of your history as well?
It's a part of my history. My mother was stolen. She's part of the stolen generation. And the reason she placed me in the orphanage was because she didn't want to get us stolen.
The issue of the stolen generation has been a very great one here in Australia. In the early days and right through a lot of the 20th century, many children were removed from Aboriginal homes because the government of the day and society of the day felt that young people needed to be acculturated into Western homes, and they were just taken. And quite often they never saw their family again. And Joan's family has been part of this. It came to a climax when the federal government of Australia made an official apology to the Aboriginal people. And Joan, I suppose that warmed your heart, but it didn't take away a lot of the pain in your family history.
That's correct, yes.
You survived those years in an orphanage. Had you found the Lord Jesus Christ at that stage?
I did. I had the Lord with me for a long time.
And then you met somebody who really turned your life around. Who was that person?
Yeah, that was the Lord. The Lord really turned my life around.
And you also met a lady who had been a drunkard, and her life turned around, and she was an inspiration to you?
Yes, she used to drink alcohol a lot and have wild parties, and she became a friend of mine, and after a couple of years she left the town where we were, and she went down to Perth, and it was to try and get her husband into the faith and away from alcohol. And
you ended up at Mamarafa College. You've been a primary teacher, you've taught with Indigenous students. What made you go to Mamarafa, and what are your plans for the future?
I just felt the Lord calling me to that area of work where He wanted me to go out to the other to my people and let them know about the true faith.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Joan. And Leo, my brother, Kempsey born, Kempsey bred. And what happened in your life? You grew up in a church-related home, in a Seventh-day Adventist home?
Yes.
And the wheels fell off?
The wheel fell off, yeah.
What happened to you?
Well, I grew up in Kempsey, a little town outside of Kempsey called Bellbrook on the reserve there. It's my mother's country, and we went to many different churches came into this reserve.
What was your mother's tribe?
Dungutty.
Okay. Can you spell that?
D-H-U-G-U-T-T-I.
A difficult name to pronounce, but you did it very easily.
I think I spell it right.
And yes, what happened?
Well, we went to different churches, came in there, John. There was Salvation Army, Catholic, Baptist, Church of England. But my grandmother was the backbone of the Seventh-day Adventists. We lived around there, and my father's from a different part of the country, the area. But when we grew up there, we was always following our grandmother's footsteps with the Seventh-day Adventists. You know, I also went to Mirrowinny Garden. There was a school started by Pastor Rosendahl, and I went to that school for a while. And I remember one camp meeting that this minister came there and he preached. I forget the topic now, but the Holy Spirit touched my heart, and I walked out of that tent crying, and I looked up in the air and I said, Lord, I want to work for you one day. And from that day, the old devil came in and really twisted this, you know.
And a 14-year-old heart has a lot of space for the devil.
Yes.
When he gets his mind to it. Yeah. And then what happened? You grew up?
I grew up, and when I went to my teens, I sort of went astray, went, you know, into the bright lights, and they were too bright for me. And I just wandered into the worldly life for many years. But I never gave up, and the Lord never gave up on me. Every town I went to, and I always looked for an Adventist church. And I went back and I just looked to introduce myself to the people, the minister, and then I went on again. Yeah. But I prayed wherever I went. Whatever I did, I prayed and I prayed.
Yeah, in a little while we're going to be talking about our college in Perth, Mamarafa College. And that is where you and I first met. I came over and took some classes, and there was this bright-looking fellow called Leo. And what finally got you to Mamarafa College, Leo?
Well, I heard of Mamarafa when it first began in '97, I think it was. But I wasn't ready for it, I don't think. I was still wandering in the world. But I was running into too many brick walls. My life was deteriorating, and I need, you know, well, I wouldn't, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired of the life I was living, and all the doors were closing around me. And I knew in some of these jobs that I had that the Lord had put me in, but then the doors closed. Yeah.
And you graduated. The old devil worked on you there. He told you couldn't graduate, didn't he?
Oh, he told me a lot of things. Many times I often walk out on Mamarafa, but there was nowhere else to go. I've been everywhere, there was nowhere else to go. And there was no other life.
We saw you in your cap and gown.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
And the Lord has called you to Armidale in the New England Rangers.
He did, yeah.
And what are your responsibilities day to day?
To tell the people about what they can do for themselves if they only just let go what they're doing. Yeah. And how the Lord has changed my life. And a lot of these people in that area know me. Yeah. I'm from that area, you know that.
Yes.
And a lot of them I grew up with, and they've seen the other side of my life, and then now they see the new side of me, and they're always wondering why, how did you do it? You know, it will give you the strength and the guidance and the confidence.
I'd have to say, Leo, if I lived up there and I saw you striding down the street, to me you're a very striking figure. But Joan and Leo, I want to ask you a question. Is it harder for an Aboriginal to succeed in Australia than it is for a white person?
Yes, very hard.
What are the problems? What makes it difficult for you, Joan?
One of the things is resources. the Aboriginal people haven't got as many resources as the non-Aboriginal.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest crux of the matter.
Have you come across instances in your life where you've gone into a place and the walls have gone up, you're Aboriginal and you're not welcome in here?
Yeah, many places, not only in the Aboriginal community, in a white man, you know.
Yeah. It still exists in,
It still
in the
exists
21st
today.
century?
It does, yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
You know, we have a huge work in the Indigenous area. There is much work yet to be done. Don't go away, because when we return, we're going to talk about the wonderful work that is being done in the education of our Indigenous people here in Australia. Just wait. Welcome back to Smart from the Start. We have been talking about Indigenous education here in Australia, and you have already heard some of the life stories of two significant Aboriginal people who are making a very worthwhile contribution to the life of their own people here in Australia. We have with us also Pastor Ken Vogel. It's really nice to have you with us, a senior church pastor here in Australia, and I'm just wondering, is there a worldwide perspective that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is taking on Indigenous people? Because we talk about the problems here in Australia, but I know in the United States they have the issue of the American Indians and the African Americans who are there. Is the church got any official attitude or progress in the last 10 or 20 years they've made in this direction?
Well, the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a mission, and that is to take the good news of Jesus Christ to every people group. And where Indigenous people are minorities, wherever it is in the world, there are unique needs, and we have to address those needs, and we are committed to addressing those needs to ensure that the gospel in fact comes to those people. And here in Australia, our Indigenous people do have very special needs, and so we're committed to that.
And you have a background of church administration, and as it involves Indigenous work here in Australia, just give us a little background as to the sort of work that's happened in the last 10 or 20 years in your experience.
Probably one of the most significant things that has happened in the last period of time has been the development of a special Indigenous college. We had a number of Indigenous people who wanted to develop their education potential, and they would go to our senior tertiary institution, but it wasn't geared for an Indigenous mind and Indigenous needs. And so folk would go, they'd make the effort, but they weren't able to complete it. So we established a college that was designed around the needs of our Indigenous people. And I'd be interested, for example, to ask Joan and Leo, you know, would you have been able to achieve the further education that you've had, Leo, and that you're now involved in, Joan? Would you have gone to Avondale College, our senior tertiary institution in Australia?
Well, I've known about Avondale for many years, but I didn't get there. It didn't interest me. But when I found out about Mamarafa, you know, an Aboriginal name as well, and so there's a family environment here, so it gave me more urge to go there and check it out and see what it could do.
Leo, does Mamarafa have a meaning? What does it mean? Can anyone help me?
Yeah, well,
I just thought...
The Mama is actually the Western Desert language for God, and Rafa meaning healing, and so God is the one who heals. That's the meaning of Mama Rafa.
And you people might like to look at some of these pictures of Mamarafa College. It is a beautiful place. And I believe also, Pastor Ken, that these courses that they do have accreditation from the government?
That's correct. They've been accredited, so they have national recognition.
So, Leo, what was your qualification when you graduated?
Well, I'm a advanced diploma in ministerial.
That's more than I've got. You're very modest. And you know, we go a little bit further than Mama Rafa, and we'll come back to that, but we've had a school in West Australia for many years, and it is called Karalundi. And when I drove out of the desert after crossing 7 deserts, and I drove into Karalundi, I thought I had arrived at an oasis. In fact, it is an oasis that has a underground river, and you can actually buy Karalundi bottled water. And Steve, you've been following this conversation with great interest and nodding of heads, and I know that you have been committed to Indigenous education for a long time. What is the vision that you have in your role as director of our Aboriginal work in Australia?
Yeah, John, that's a good question, big question. But what I dream for is outreach centres dotted strategically around the country. Schools functioning as more than schools, strategically located, so that young people from a lot of these remote communities where they have no access to school can come. Some students from main centres where the education program there isn't meeting their needs can come. And not only do they gain an education, but they grow an understanding of Jesus and what he wants for them in their life. That's my dream, John.
What type of schools? Sole teacher schools, sole charge schools, or are they connected with Karalundi, or how would they operate?
John, I suppose, you know, first of all, if we worked on our current schools and existing schools and make them friendlier to Indigenous people, like our current Kempsey school, which has a 25% Indigenous group there, a great school. But I think it would be great to have these boarding schools, John, like Karalundi, set up, that go from upper primary through to junior and hopefully eventually to years 11 and 12. And then on from into post-compulsory education to offer them job skills training, like the Mama Rafa program, which offers the ministerial training, pastoral training program, offers the health course certificates and so forth. That's the future for our Indigenous work.
And Ken, as an administrator, do you feel that the most effective person to help the Aboriginal people is an Aboriginal person?
I think it's combined, John. Certainly our Aboriginal people must be integral to the planning as well as the actual carrying out of all of these things. But we need to do it together. That is the bottom line.
That's it.
You know, you've just had a very small insight of the scope of the work that needs to be done with our Indigenous people here in Australia. It has been wonderful talking with you, panel, and thank you so much for coming in, and particularly you, Leo and Joan. You've both come a long way to talk to us. Your contribution is appreciated. We admire you and marvel at where you've come from because the Lord Jesus Christ has called you, and we look forward to a great future in Indigenous education in a Christian setting here in Australia. Thank you.